Well, it's February, and that means February deer chores. And a lot of people wait for these. Now, they might be different on your property. I would almost look at it like a snapshot. January, February, March, these are what we're doing, and try to get these done by quarter even. And a lot of these you'll notice too, if you look at my February deer chores from last year, a lot of those are going to be different from this year because these are what I'm doing on my property right here. And it's a logical progression of what I'm doing on my land, which might not necessarily be yours, but there's going to be a lot of parallels between my land and yours, depending on it's different in mine because you might have owned your property for 10 years, but because I live and work here, and this is what I do for a living, then we have the opportunity to do small things or big things almost on a daily or weekly basis. We're always getting something done as it relates to deer hunting and habitat. I don't like not to. That's what I've always enjoyed about deer hunting, is whether it was scouting, getting dropped off on one side of a section of public land and getting picked up on the other 3 hours later, finding my own way through there. It was always just being outside. And so partly my love for outdoors, deer habitat, deer hunting, it kind of all goes together, but it's something I really enjoy outdoors. And most of all, just get outdoors, get some of this stuff done. It's a lot of fun. And this is what I'm doing. And some of this pertains to you too. Number one, most of it will. Number one, non-shed bedding work. What I mean by that is we have a lot of areas right now where bucks are coming into consistent food sources on our land, corn and brassicas. They're hammering the brassicas right now. They're digging big feeding circles just right out here by the house. Then we still have standing corn. We still have corn on the cob. We still have areas that can hit that corn, and then we have a lot of areas of brassicas. So we have deer scattered throughout hitting our food sources, but we have a lot of dead areas in between. And just because the deer are there right now does not mean that they're hitting there heavily during the hunting season. So a lot of areas that I want to go in and cut bedding areas in that relate to September, October, November, December aren't necessarily where those deer are right now in early February. So I can get in there and not spook bucks or deer in general. What's interesting about that is I can go in there and cut and create habitat improvements and bedding area work around here. My bedding area work consists of some hinge cutting. For example, you can cut a box elder in pretty frigid temperature. A lot of times they're leaning a certain way. And always remember that you're cutting parallel to the ground, level of the ground. If it's a hillside, you're still cutting, you're cutting perpendicular. I guess if you put a level on it, it'd be perfectly level, which the ground might not be. But bottom line is you're not angling that cut at all. Sometimes we'll angle a cut because we want to cheat that tree to fall to slightly one side or the other, so you can just slightly tilt your saw. But really, the more you angle your saw, the more you lose control of where that trunk's going to go. So can actually hinge cut some trees right now, but I need to get canopy down first. So I'm focusing on pockets of large aspen. I'm focusing on undesirable oaks. I'm cutting those down, creating lots of sunlight, and then if I have box elders I can cut down nearby. They're easy cuts because you're just tipping them from the backside. They're very prolific and great regenerators, and we're using a lot of those right now for our rabbit huts that I'll talk about here in a second, for building that living bush over that pallet, that pile of pallets, so that we can, and it's crazy, you know, we've done that we have trail cameras on those now. It's amazing the birds that we're seeing, blue jays and cardinals getting into those little thickets. They like housing in there, I believe, let alone the rabbits and even squirrels getting in and out of those or moving around them. So they're really becoming small game magnets. And when you consider we're doing it next to strips of switchgrass that are 50 feet wide to 6 feet wide, sometimes an acre or a quarter acre, all different sizes, then there's a lot of cover that's being provided just adjacent to those rabbit huts in the form of solid switch, and then pollinator blends, early successional growth, and then certainly all the cuttings right there. So there's a lot going on in those areas. But we can complete a lot of cutting right now without disturbing the bucks that are dropping their antlers. We already have bucks on the property. I could guess 8 or 10 bucks that have both antlers lost. We rarely see one with just one still holding. It seems like they get them off their head pretty quick. I have a regular subscriber on YouTube. He comments a lot. I know a lot of you are regular subscribers and you don't comment very much. It's great. I love to have you, but some of you comment a lot. There's one, it goes by D Swish out of Pennsylvania. And D's talked about, I think it was an 8-point that's been holding for 3 weeks, one half. So he hasn't found the other half yet, but the other half's still holding. He sees it consistently. And you do see that from time to time, but for the most part, they're dropping them pretty quick. We even found, you don't find all the time, but you still find antlers a percentage of the time where they're right next to each other, let alone dropping in the same 100 yards, 200 yards. But what's crazy, last year I think we found 23 sheds overall and 21 different bucks. We only found 2 matching sets. So we're either not good at looking at them or they drop them somewhere else. Bottom line is we're seeing that happen right now. We want to collect those. We like seeing them. We had some random stop by last year that we never even saw during hunting season this year. Just this morning, there was a giant buck that crossed the road about 2 miles from here. I'm hoping he shows up, maybe drops an antler or 2 here, but it's always fun to just see what's in the neighborhood, especially some of those random ones that come in. And so I'm really focusing on cutting, especially right now, because we're going to see a lot of antlers drop in mid-February to late February into early March. And so I want to make sure that my cutting activities are taking place outside of those areas. And the bucks right now, they're not traveling a half mile to go from bedding to food source. They're pretty close. So we can skip around and find those areas. Number 2, food plot expansion marking. We have about 2.5 acres we want to increase this year, and that'll be in the form of our greens. So we're going to sidestep a lot of our greens. Right now we had about 8 acres of greens, and then we had about 5.5 acres of corn. So I'm looking at adding about 2.5 more acres of food plot. We'll keep the amount of green we have, but we'll relocate that into early successional growth areas where it was old fields that regenerate. So we have a lot of young aspen and smaller trees to push over and briars. And I know that in all our areas that we can do that, we're going to expand our food plots by approximately 2.5 acres. So that's what I'm looking at. I want to mark that out now while there's snow on the ground. I can see the lay of the land. There's not too much snow. And I might do some of that into March too. But with the snow on the ground, it's very easy to see that change in elevation and exactly where the habitat goes from big timber to light timber. And when I'm marking that, I'll go to client properties, and I fell into this in the past too, where I'm using marking ribbon and I'm just going around the tree just to put a band of marking ribbon. I encourage you to leave 2 or 3 feet of streamer hanging from the bottom, because a lot of times we're not going back and making these food plots till middle of summer. So when there's leaves and foliage on the tree, we're looking for these little bands around a tree. It's very hard. And let's face it, those rolls are what, $1.99 for 100 feet or whatever it is. So a lot better to leave a long streamer so you can see it blowing in the wind. And then I look at, like, when I'm done clearing that plot, I want to see that whole ring of streamers still hanging like we did in our Elma property we had a couple of years ago in Buffalo County, Wisconsin. We cleared food plots, the same thing. So when we're done, the operator that's out there, whether you're doing it or someone else, has no mistake that this is where food plot should be, this is where it should end. So great time to do that right now, and that's what we're going to be doing. Number 3, frost seeding switchgrass. That's one of our February deer fails, meaning when you have areas that you need to frost seed, for one, you should be ordering your switchgrass. John Comp's probably the best supplier of getting a lot of switchgrass and consistently getting it. And I know he's got a huge order that's being placed, but John Comp from Northwoods Whitetails, I know a lot of people are rapidly waiting for that switchgrass to come in, but great time to order, and it's a great time to frost seed. And this is when we frost seed a lot of our switchgrass, when you have openings in the snow. Some people will frost seed on top of the snow. I even thought that was kind of a good idea in the past, but then you see a lot of runoff. You see areas where it washes off in a quick melt, the ground's frozen, your switchgrass seeds end up in piles 20 feet over there. I've had that happen in Wisconsin before. So always better to wait for that snow to get out of there and then frost seed that switchgrass, especially if there's a little bit of give to the soil on top so that it can absorb that seed and really get it healed into the ground so it creates a great seed bed, and then it's ready to explode in the spring. And even when it does explode in the spring, everyone looks at, well, my soil temperature is 60 degrees. But if you haven't had moisture or rain for a couple weeks, it has to have moisture and that heat to come in. And one thing more on switchgrass, one of the big fails with switchgrass, people are ordering switchgrass right now and they have no idea what they're doing with it. They have no idea the purpose. They have no idea how to maintain that when it comes in to get rid of weeds, how they should have maintained it before they put it out, what ways to plant it. So I encourage you to look at our 4 easy ways to plant switchgrass. The video we put out last year will come out with similar videos here soon when we can see the switchgrass better in the snow. But I encourage you to put some of that out. But I encourage you to check out that video because there's a lot of different conditions that you can plant switchgrass in successfully. But both Dylan and I have seen people that have planted switchgrass big areas at a time, and they just didn't have a solid plan, so now it's all weeds. And so really encourage you to make sure you have a plan, make sure you have a purpose for where that switch is going and why, and then order the seed. I compared it in another video, maybe 2, we've been shooting, I compare it to the run on toilet paper in early COVID days, where people are stocking up on toilet paper with the thought it was going to disappear when it didn't. And that's almost like switchgrass. People are gobbling it up. Same with buckwheat, and they're gobbling it up. They have no purpose, and it's almost a waste of seed at that point. So make sure you have that purpose, or it's going to be a big failure. But also a failure if you don't recognize those times where the snow opens up in February and we have a really good melt and thaw. Great time to go in there and frost seed. We're also making more rabbit huts. That's something enjoyable to do. I like it too because a lot of the rabbit huts we're making all of them right on their edge habitat in that early successional growth that I'm talking about, where it's expanded into the field a little bit. And it makes for great smaller timber to hinge cut over the rabbit huts. Great brush. It's where the rabbits are already living. But then we're making an even thicker edge. So we have the switchgrass, these thick cuttings, and deer on the other side can't see us. So it's creating a really nice block and visual barrier. We're creating low hinge cuts for the rabbits. And deer can also browse all the way around them. So we're accomplishing a lot. We see the birds like them. Squirrels are going in there picking up the seeds from the box elders that are hanging down. So we're going to create living bushes above those, and it's pretty cool to see the rabbits already using each one of them. We actually have trail cameras on just to check out rabbits, but pretty cool to see that happening. We're going to continue to do that around because I love rabbits, love pheasants, even if I never even go hunting for them. But I love having a diverse property, and it's almost impossible to make a high quality whitetail parcel without having some residual effect for including a lot of great wildlife species and pollinators like birds, butterflies, bees. So we're doing that right now. Number 5, shooting bow, indoor and out. I always love going over to lacrosse archery and taking a few indoor rounds. It always reminds me how out of shooting shape I am when I start hitting the indoor and even just shooting 30 to 35 arrows at a time just for a half round to see how I'm doing, let alone if we can take some time in the snow's a little bit more shallow. We have a 50-yard range right out here behind the house, and then we can shoot over 100 in a couple different lanes up here by the pole building. So I want to take advantage of some outdoor shooting if I can, if the temperatures will cooperate, and then also certainly getting into your favorite indoor range. And like Dylan pointed out, this is so important, is that you're going to make changes now. A lot of times people take a break after the hunting season, January, time to get back into shooting. But if you're going to change your sight, your arrows, your bow, your rests, whatever you're going to do, your release, right now is a great time to start making those changes. Following someone like Chris B Archery, one of my favorite pro archers. He's younger. He really knows how to use YouTube and create quality videos on YouTube, and he's a great teacher. And so he lives and breathes this. This is what he does for a living. But Chris B is a great person to follow if you don't do so already, as it relates to shooting and everything whitetail. He loves to hunt too. So I know he's shooting in a lot of indoor shoots right now, Lancaster. He'll be shooting in Vegas next weekend, but I encourage you to follow along. That'll help you out greatly too. Number 6, non-shed area stand marking. Again, a lot of the areas where I'm marking in the fall for where I want to hunt in the fall, maybe put a new water hole in, find a stand location, mark it with that ribbon, are not areas where the deer are at right now, because they're 2 different types of habitat. For one, it's good to get out in the woods, whether you're marking food plots, stand locations, and see where deer are now versus where they're at in the fall. Because you start to learn the differences between habitat. The deer are here October, November, December, sometimes September, maybe a little in January, and then they're here in February, March. And then in April, a lot of times they're going back to their summer ranges. I even see that happening. They go back to their summer ranges in the wintertime too. A lot of times folks will find sheds a mile from where they're at, typically in the fall. So it's important to recognize these changes. February is a great time to do so, and it's a great time for you to transition from off-season scouting, knowing where they're at during the fall, to off-season scouting, knowing where they're going to be during the spring and summer and late winter, which might not necessarily be in the fall. Great time to mark stands though, because again, if you have 3 or 4 inches of snow on the ground, a foot, you can get around the woods easily. You can see the complete lay of the land. You can see that edge habitat where transitions from mature timber to younger timber, from shrubs to timber, from open field. It's easy to see those transitions, and it's crazy how you can just go out and say, I bet you there's deer following that line of habitat change over there, and you go over and find a trail. That trail will tell you where to hunt, even though that trail was made a week ago in old snow, only a handful of deer went through. They're going to tell you where they're going to follow that same trail and why during the hunting season. So really great time to go mark non-shed areas, again, so you're not spooking off deer that are holding their antlers. Not to mention, you could always say that, especially in some of the extreme northern areas, I've seen people go in there as a deer group up in the UP. They're out in a deer yard area looking at deer. And you're seeing a herd of 200 deer running around in a circle. It's literally taking lives off the end of a heavy winter of energy by spending from getting away from those people that are, quote, trying to do a census count or survey. So be very mindful of that too in a harsh winter in some of those extreme northern areas. And number 7, great time to order your shrubs. Dylan, I think you ordered spruce.
Spruce, yep, got a bunch of spruce coming. Pretty pumped about it.
Yeah, and I need to order red cedar. And so a lot of the areas that I'm opening up to the sunlight, bringing regeneration down to the ground, early successional growth into the woods, great time to add some red cedar in this area and help to diversify my habitat a little bit better. Where you see that mixed habitat of cedar, early successional growth, aspen, some oaks mixed in, outstanding wildlife areas. And so I like to clump and cluster my red cedar, groups of 5 to 10 within those cuttings. You go another 10 yards, do 5 or 10, do another 10 yards, do some more. And I like putting those red cedars in and around cut tops, meaning they're not hinge cut. They act more as cages. And deer don't typically hit those red cedars, but when they're young, they're green, they're sticking out of the snow, and they're in bedding areas, they tend to get picked on. So an easy way to remedy that, whether you're planting white pine, which is another favorite of mine, white spruce back in the woods because they're shade tolerant, or red cedar, you need to keep that sunlight coming in for them to grow and prosper. It's great to stick them back into those cut tops so that you're caging them from deer. That's a good practice anywhere. Even if you're having logging done, now is the time to order those trees and get those trees in 50 to 100 per acre. Literally, if you're getting 20 acres cut by about 150, 200 trees, put them in groups of 5 to 10 out in those areas. We expect to have good bedding, just to complement good bedding and hardwood regen. And it's a great time to make sure you order those trees, let alone the shrubs. I know I looked on Big Rock Trees. I utilize them. They help me put some screening willows out here along the road. And you can look right on their site and they'll say we have 2,200 of this variety left. We have 1,200 of this. They're telling you how much is on there, and they only have a set amount per year and that they can cut. And I know they'll cut more in the springtime. They'll get more cuttings. They have refrigeration so they can keep them for a long period of time. But the problem is once you get into June and July, it's too hot to plant them unless you excessively water them. So it's really important to make sure you're ordering all this. That's Tom Haas. He owns Big Rock Trees. You can just look up bigrocktrees.com online, and they have some great options. They used to have 25 different options, but they boil it down to their 6 or 8 favorite, including hybrid poplars, hybrid willows, silky willows, red osier dogwood, some of the high-end, really high-quality shrubs for deer that we'll talk about in another video. And again, now's the time to order it, whether it's trees, conifers, shrubs. Make sure you get those orders in because it'll be planting time very soon. You know the time flies. It's just around the corner. Again, this is February for the deer chores. I hope you're keeping track with your deer chores and you're keeping up on them because it all pays off huge dividends when it comes to the fall, producing a great herd and a great hunt. And it can be done this season. This isn't something, again, that takes years to accomplish. We turned around this property in 1 year. Second year was amazing. I can't wait for the third year, but it takes consistent work, even if it's not a lot of work, even if you're just doing what you need to along the way, just picking at it. The efforts, especially in the right direction, will be well worth the effort come this fall. Folks, I want to make sure you check out my web class video series, whether it's how to design your food plot program or how to design your property in general. And we have a new one coming out that'll be how to hunt the rut. But these bucks back here are a testament. Some of these bucks go back to 93. They're even in different states. I urge you to check out those web classes so that you can help yourself, help your land, help your hunt. The link is in the description. And also for those that have tried them out, I encourage you to offer some feedback in the comments below. Thank you.